Hello and welcome to the Madhouse UK podcast. I'm Steve Tierney. Nice to see you all again. I'm not seeing any of you, of course, because I can't look through the computer screen at you, or if I can, then things are getting really spooky. But if you've got a webcam and there's some way to do that, then maybe we can work on that in the future. Anyway, I've just finished the Madhouse chat room tonight, and thank you so much for everyone who came into the Madhouse chat room. It was a good session, I think. We decided that tonight we would talk about how we could improve two classes, and those were the Rogue, human rogues, or other classes can be rogues, but broadly they're humans, and bards. And lots of good ideas were shared. But before I get onto that, a couple of other kind of bookkeeping things I want to do. So first of all, Middenghast and Demon Rift 3, I've been working on them most of the evening. I did some comic sorting as well, but for the last couple of hours I've been chugging away at them, and I'm going to be doing a few more hours yet on both of those. Big things coming for both of them as soon as I get them finished. Demon Rift is basically ready to roll. I've had a bug that's been causing it to crash each time I ran the first turn. I introduced a whole bunch of new terrain. I know one of those is causing the problem. I just don't know which one. So I'm going to work on that tonight. Middenghast, I'm doing paperwork and web pages for the launch, so that should be interesting. What else have we got? Most of you know, if you're playing the game, that there's a special offer on at the moment. Runs till Friday night, and somebody said, "Oh, Steve always does a special offer when he's about to go skiing." And yeah, you're right. I mean, work hard, play hard. That's what I say. So, I put a lot of time in, a lot of effort. Every once in a while, I go away. It's nice to have a bit of fun. If I can do a special offer and it pays for the fun, great. If I can't, I have to spend real money. It's all real money, of course. Anyway, those of you who take up the special offers, I hope you enjoy them. It's great value for you, but also very helpful to me, so brilliant. Thank you very much. It's quite soon after Christmas, so I never get a lot of special offers taken up in the one that's kind of right after Christmas. The next big batch tends to be about Easter, and then obviously summer, and then Halloween, and then Christmas again. But these kind of brief ones, some people find them useful. I find them useful, so it works pretty well. Right, what else have we got? Oh yeah, so in the chat when people were talking about Lair Loot, people were talking about Lair Loot. It's a fairly recent development in the game, but as well as kind of treasure you find when you kill monsters and lying around the dungeons and chests that you can open, which aren't that common. More about that later. You can find a Lair Loot, and a Lair Loot is a terrain type. You go over there, you loot it. They're normally in a place that's slightly difficult to reach, or off the beaten track in a dungeon. Encourage you to go somewhere rather than just the straight route through from one set of stairs to the other. And you go to the Lair Loot, you get a little bit of money, a little bit of treasure, and what some people didn't seem to know, but most people did, is that you also have the chance of developing Lair Loot points that get you to a skill. When you've done a certain amount of Lair Loots, I think it's 5, your character gets a special skill, Lair Looter, something like that. Anyway, the good thing about this skill is, the more times you do that, the more Lair Loots that one character finds, they can gradually creep that skill up. Now, it's quite hard for one character to find lots of Lair Loots, although you can get lucky and catch a few in the same place, and if you're the first one there, you can get them all. But everyone rushes to them because everyone wants to get that skill. It's the only way to get the skill. And the skill goes up quite a lot of levels to the highest level, which is something like Ultimate Lair Looter. Now, nobody's got that skill. I checked tonight to see if anybody had the skill in the game. No one has. So nobody's ever quite got that far. It's difficult to achieve, so good luck somebody doing it. But there is one player, Rene, you know who you are. And Rene has got one character that's managed to get up to Grandmaster Lair Looter, which is 2 below Ultimate. So the race is on. Try and beat Rene if you can, but good luck with that. And Rene's a very experienced player, so it's not surprising he's managed to crack it and find as many as he has. And also worked out that it's really worth doing because it gets better and better, this skill. Right, so on to the things that we discussed tonight in the chat room. So those of you who are there know this, but I thought I'd sort of have a chat live about it as well and tell you kind of my thinking on it. So people were coming up with ideas left, right and centre, and some of them are easy to implement, some of them are virtually impossible to implement because of the way that the game is made. We can do a lot, but there has to be some mechanism to do it, because we don't hard code anymore. We don't write actual code into the program. The program has a lot of soft editors that let us do what we call soft coding, which is they're very complicated editors, so you can do most things in them, but we're not going to anytime soon be inventing whole new things we've never coded. So somebody suggested a new skill, even more defensive. It was imaginatively called, and that they wanted better defences, but at the cost of attack. So your character is choosing in the classic kind of tabletop roleplay way to go into a defensive stance, sacrifice some ability to attack, but get a better chance to defend themselves. Seems a useful thing for a rogue. Obviously easy to do because similar to a number of other skills out there. So we're going to do that one. Somebody then said, could you have ground-based traps? Not by which they don't mean traps that are going to get you. They mean could a rogue make a trap and put it on the ground and trap other people? Well, I wouldn't want to implement that for adventurers because whilst it sounds great fun, in an actual live game where everybody's doing stuff all at the same time in a turn and you've only got the snapshot from the previous turn to work out what you're going to do, things that suddenly appear mid-turn can be very annoying. Now, there's some of that in the game that you just can't escape, but you wouldn't want it so chaotic that looking at a turn wouldn't give you any idea what you could do thereafter. It makes playing the game virtually impossible. So if I was going to do it, I would let the rogue make a trap that only affected monsters, thereby not affecting any players, so not being a big problem. That's not difficult to do. I do already have the code in the game to enable an item on the floor to trigger an effect. Don't use it very often, but it's used once or twice. So fairly easy for me to, well, not easy, but it's quite a lot of work, but I could make a bunch of different ground-based traps that rogues could construct if they had the right skill, and then they could put it on the floor, and the next time a monster walked over that, it would trigger the ground-based effect. Now the trouble with that, somebody else said, well, I've got a skill a bit like that already, and I don't really know it works, because I put it down there, and I presume it works. I never really see it work, because the game isn't a live game that you walk around and see things happen. You see the after effects in the form of a text report. So you kind of have to take it on faith, I suppose. There might be some ways with some of them that I can leave some sort of residue so you can see it happen. So for instance, we thought of three. One, I won't name them yet, but one would be an explosive trap that just went boom when a monster stepped on it. I don't think I could perhaps, if it was an open terrain, I could turn it to a charred terrain that would then revert to an open terrain over a turn or two. Wouldn't have any other effect other than for you to see that an explosive went off there. And that would affect every monster on the same square, or maybe even every monster on the same or an adjacent square, which would be quite a powerful thing because you could have lots of monsters affected then. But maybe, we'll see. That would depend. The cost of constructing the trap would be relevant to the amount of damage it did. So it would be a cheaper trap to construct if it only affected one monster, or if it only affected all the monsters on one square. If it affected a radius, it would be a more expensive trap to construct. So explosive is one. Sticky goop, some sort of sticky goop is another, by which I don't mean Gwyneth Paltrow's sticky goop, God forbid, but I mean sticky goop as in gunk that you get on you. Oh God, we really are venturing down bad paths here. But the gist of it is that you get kind of stuck up with the stuff like a spider web, almost like a web spell from D&D, if you like, and the effect on monsters would be to reduce their movement dramatically. So if you were being chased down by something you knew was going to kill you, you throw a trap on the floor behind you, the monster walks over it, it can't catch up with you. It run out of movement points much quicker than you do. Now I know some players know how to use the system to make that happen anyway, but some monsters have as many movement points as you do, and it would be really useful if some really horrible nasty was chasing you. But then again, I'd probably make some really horrible nasties immune to it, so it wouldn't be perfect. And then somebody said, well, I think I suggested this one, kind of a sleeping vapour, a kind of a sleeping gas that makes the monsters drowsy. The effect would be to make their defences and attacks slightly worse, and perhaps slow them down a little bit as well. Something like that. So 3 different effects, and I could leave some sort of residue maybe to show they'd happened, but you'd have to you get your text report. I threw my trap on the floor hoping a monster would fall on it, and then the monsters would do their thing. I mean, it would be working. That's how the system works. Once the things are in, the monsters trigger it, but you can't always see. If you're around the corner, you're not necessarily going to see anything happen. So then somebody said, well, what about having monsters be able to remove some of the things that can happen to you? Well, I'm just developing a new bunch of them. So for people who don't play the game, sometimes a monster's attack or an effect in an area can give you a condition which affects you for some time. The original one, the classic one, was called mortification, which was an effect that some monsters did to you, and it was gradually dying was basically what it was. It wasn't a disease, it was like a magical effect, and that you could then get a spell that removes mortification. There's loads of others since then. You can be made drowsy, you can be made shaken, you can be made scared, you can be made inebriated. There are all different ones. You can have a mental effect ones, physical effect ones, magical effect ones, but they aren't that common on monsters really. Even though lots of monsters do them, compared to the number of monsters there are, it's not a thing that affects you very often. There are some really bad ones. There's petrification, turns you to stone, doesn't kill you, but and actually makes you quite hard to hit because you're made of stone, but you can't move in it. You spend turns kind of standing there wondering if it's ever going to go away, and sometimes it doesn't ever go away. So so that's one of the sort of the classics. So I'm in the process of developing a bunch of new ones. I'm going to do perhaps another dozen or so effects and create some new monsters that give you them. Some of them are going to be quite different to ones that have gone before. But whenever I make an effect, I need a way to get rid of the effect. I don't always tell people what it is. Sometimes you have to play to find out. But I suspect a couple of them will be removed by rogues. That's what I'm getting to here. So one of the new things we're going to let rogues do is remove a couple of the conditions. Now, I'm not quite sure what they'll be, but they'll be themed so that rogues can get rid of them. So unlucky, for instance, might be something a rogue could get rid of. Okay. Somebody suggested they wanted Mighty Leap 2. So rogues already have the ability to do what's called a Mighty Leap, which lets them move 2 squares instead of 1. Very useful. A little bit unbalancing sometimes because used right, rogues can get around very quickly. If I do it, and I probably will, it'll let you move 3 squares in one bound, but there'll be a bunch of costs to it. So you'll have to pay XP to use it, experience, which makes it a bit, limits its use a little bit, and also gives you a good use for XP. It makes you have to decide between that or upgrading skills and things. What else? It will probably have a chance of doing you damage if you slip or crash into a wall or something. Probably not very much of a chance. We'll see about that. And it will only be usable in dungeons. I don't want you to be using it on the overland because in the game, whilst everything is squares, in a dungeon a square is just kind of over there. Whereas on the overland a square is a couple of miles or 5 miles of land or something you're talking over. And it takes a bit of imagination to just think of them as different even though they're all squares on a map. But it wouldn't make sense for a Mighty Leap to take you 15 miles. So that's why it wouldn't work outside. Finally, this takes a little bit of getting your head around, but there aren't many traps in the game. Now, in traditional role-playing games, there are lots of traps for rogues to remove, and there are some in Dungeonworld, but they take a bit of setting up. Now, what I really need to do is sit down and allow some types of terrain to auto-generate traps, probably like open dungeon squares, for instance. That would always happen at the end of a turn before you get your turn fin out. So when you see your turn fin out, anything that's appeared will be there. You've got to avoid it. What we don't like is for things too often to just appear in your way that you didn't see on your turn because it just feels like you're not playing the game then. You've got to sort of see what you're... There's some guesswork to it. What are the other characters and creatures going to do? But you don't want too much changing in the terrain. Somebody else suggested, could rogues lock doors? That would be a really bad idea because if there were 15 people in a room and they all want to get out because there's a big monster in there and so they all rush for the door and the rogue gets to the door first and locks it, all the others won't be able to get out. Now that in and of itself sounds funny, right? But what you've got to understand is how turns work. They would spend 15 orders and real money to pay for their turn getting the result, I couldn't walk forwards because there was something in the way. I couldn't walk forwards because there was something in the way. That being the door that was now closed. At the end of their turn, that was an open door. Doors don't change from closed to open mid-turn with the programming, and except in very special circumstances. They can, but it's pretty rare. Mostly, all of that sort of stuff sets at the end of the turn before the map is produced, so you can see it and know how to plan. So that's why I don't like rogues being able to lock doors. But having terrain auto-generate at the end of a turn, it'd be quite rare, but you'll see a trap appear, and then you can walk over it and take what it does, or a rogue can get to it first and disarm it. So there's something interesting for a rogue to do that's in keeping with thieves and rogues in most fantasy games. And so I'm going to do that. It might take me a little while, this one, but I'm going to do it. I think that's a good upgrade. So then we went on to bards. And the first thing that everybody talked about, obviously, was songs. The bard already has the ability to sing a number of songs to affect companions, but people said, what about an area effect song? What about a song the bard sings and people in an area effect, rather than at the moment you target a character with it? Okay, yeah, we'll do that. They're going to cost XP to use, because that's the limiter, which makes you have to decide how often to use it. But area effect is quite powerful. It's much better than what bards do at the moment. So 4 were suggested by me and others. One was Shanty. The effects would be to remove fear and fear-like effects. It's kind of like a upbeat pirate song. Of course, that removing fear, that seems to make sense. A ballad whose effect would be to heal. A little bit of damage, not a lot. Everyone in the area might get a point back, because you don't want to make this too, or maybe there's a 50% chance they'll get a point back. You don't want it to be too powerful, otherwise it becomes, if you get a bunch of bards together all singing, monsters can never kill you, and then the game is unbalanced. So you've got to tread a bit carefully. So it'll cost XP to use, the effects will be limited, it'll be randomised, but it won't be useless, because it's got to be worth doing as well. Somebody suggested Anthem, that removes some sickly conditions, kind of a rousing anthem that gets rid of some of the things that can happen. I'm not sure which ones, maybe some of the new ones. And then finally, Lullaby, which has two effects. First of all, it resets the sleep tag on all the characters in the area, all the adventurers. So the effect being it gives you a bit of a nap, because at the moment players have to sleep. Now it's not a very arduous task. You only have to do it once every 10 turns. But you'd be surprised how many people forget. And if you don't do it after 10 turns, you start taking damage, and that damage escalates. You only have to then sleep once to completely reset it, but people forget. And quite useful to almost have a bard doing your sleep order for your whole party. That's basically what it is. It costs them some XP. The side effect will be that it will make characters briefly drowsy. For a turn after, or something like maybe 2 turns after it's done, they will be slightly less able to attack and defend. But we're talking about a very small amount. I just think it's nice to have a little bit of a negative effect to it. Someone else said, well, what about if bards could get an arrow that slayed a dragon? And I like that, because the kind of idea of a bard as a crusading hero that's making stories he can sing songs about is interesting. It's in keeping, isn't it? So I thought, well, how about if a bard can use experience points to make different types of slayer arrows for different, not lots of types of monsters, because I don't want to make them the ultimate killer, but just a few unusual key monsters that are kind of heroic for the bard to defeat. I'm not sure which ones yet. Dragons are one I'll probably think about. Perhaps another 4 arrows, and they'll cost quite a bit of XP for the bard to do it, but I quite like that, the bard as a kind of crusading occasional hero. And bards don't have a lot of use at the moment, so I think that would be good. Another person suggested, Snick Snack suggested, sing for your supper. The idea being that you issue the order and it gives you a ration. Well, that's a bit naff, because you can already do an order to hunt for food. It's not guaranteed, and I suppose sing for your supper would be guaranteed. So there's that, but it doesn't seem like an enormous thing to be able to do. I suppose you could get the rations and sell them. Probably there won't be an actual ration pack like you find in other ways. It'd probably be something more limited. So you'd sing for the supper, and it would give you a ration that you use in a slightly different way that could be sold for like 1 gold. Because I don't forget what current rations cost when you sell them off, so I don't remember. But we'll think about that. It might just be a ration pack. But I thought, well, let's add it a little bit more. Let's say that you sing for your supper. Not only does it give you a ration pack, but it also resets your food without you having to write the additional order to eat the ration. So you're essentially getting 2 orders, a hunt order that is guaranteed to succeed, and fed for the cost of 1 order. And it might cost a couple of XP. I don't think it's going to be used very great deal. I'm not saying this is a game changer, but it is interesting. What else is there? Make instruments equipable and give them an attack form. So somebody said, why can't you equip the weapons? Well, the reason I didn't, it's not that you can't equip weapons. I chose not to make people equip weapons because they like to use their equip slots for, I say weapons, what am I talking about? I chose not to make people equip their bardic instruments because they want to equip their weapons. And if you're holding your loot, you haven't got a sword or a bow or whatever else you're using. So I just kind of let them have the bard in their backpack and they act like they use it. The idea is kind of off camera, they're pulling the loot out, then getting the sword out again. I was trying to make things easier, and it's always worked. But I've got nothing against being able to equip your weapons and belt someone with your loot or whatever sort of things we can come up with. So I'm going to look at that. Look at making the instruments that there are at the moment, which is pipes, drums and lutes, equipable and usable as a weapon. Perhaps you poke someone in the eye with your pipe, I don't know, or and your drum you could bock them on the head with, I suppose. But then they said, well, why don't you also put in some additional instruments, and some silly ones were suggested. And when people suggest silly ideas to me, thinking I won't do it, I tend to do it. And I think that's probably what we're going to do this time. So I was suggested a conch, which will be for people in the Golden Coast area. Bagpipes I'm going to do. That might be something that Glacier Barbarians might want to use, although someone else said they didn't want Glacier Barbarian bards, who are called Scalds, they didn't want them to have instruments at all. They thought they should just sing or speak epic poetry. And then I said, well, the trouble is, the powers of the bard are linked to the weapon. So there's got to be a weapon, or I've got nothing to link the powers to. So once they realised that, they said, okay, well, what about if it's a book of epic poetry? So you kind of hold the book, and that's better for the roleplay, but it's still a thing to link the powers to. Yeah, that works perfectly, so I'm going to do that. And the other instrument that was suggested was a didgeridoo. And somebody said, for the Australian-themed area that I'm bound to do one day. Well, I never thought of doing an Australian-themed area, but you know, I quite like the idea of a rideable kangaroo, and loads of virtually every insect kills you. So there's some benefits. So maybe we'll see about that. But I'll go ahead and do those instruments, definitely. So lots of good ideas, rogue ideas, bard ideas. That's great. I'm going to have to get on and do them, but I still have quite a lot of things to do with Midgard and Demon Rift. I've got lots of work kind of piling up. The turn is due. I've got to run the turn Friday, Saturday. Please remember to get your orders in, because you're running out of time. Because I'll be running it promptly. I have to run it promptly because I'm then going on holiday the end of the following week, and I can't let the turns get too far out of whack. Otherwise, it doesn't work for the holiday days. So that's pretty much everything for tonight. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Do please remember to subscribe to this podcast if you don't already. Just click that subscribe button, and then there's a little bell next to the subscribe button. Click that so you always get notified when there's a new video. And please do like this video. That really helps us get good kind of viewer suggestions to other people who use YouTube, and leave a comment. Tell us what you're interested in. Give me your ideas in the comments. It's wonderful. Anyway, until then, talk to you soon. Bye.